Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. So today we're going to talk about more about how spirit works with the human world and why they are working with us the way that they do. So I do have Eric over here, and I have a couple of my guides from the other side. All of them are coming in and they're kind of like saying hello to the crowd. And I can see a whole bunch of other spiritual beings standing around, kind of watching this channeling, which I think is super, super funny when they do this. And it's like sometimes I open my mouth to record. And if you guys have been, watching me for longer than TikTok has existed, you have seen the way that I channel, and you know that this is how I work, and that it's really, really funny because it's like I don't always know what's going to come through until I'm actually recording. So I do see them coming through, and I see Eric here, and Eric saying, he's kind of like clapping his hands together, and he loves to do that thing where you rub your hands together, kind of like, okay, here we go, we're getting started. This should be fun, And he keeps saying, now we're here, we want to work with you on all different levels. He said, people are at different levels of consciousness, and he goes, I don't want you to go shaming or judging yourselves, because this is a really important thing to recognize that there are different aspects of consciousness. And he said, instead of thinking about it like levels, like that you have to work up and you have to try to get through different classes or grades in school, he said, because that's more of a human construct than it is a spiritual one. He said, think about it more like it's a sphere or a funnel. And he said, now at the top of the funnel is like the most expanded form of consciousness, where you are able to go outward and around even further. And so you have even more perspective or ways to see things from. And then as this funnel spins down and gets tighter and tighter and tighter until it's till that like really tight part of the funnel, he said, that's where humans kind of are. And he said, a lot of you guys can only work with where you are in terms of dimensional reality. So he said, you can only, and he's showing the five senses, he's using his hands. He said, you can only believe in what you can see and hear and feel and taste and smell and touch. And so he said, and then you believe in your emotions, but emotions even can be subjective. Like people experience emotions actually differently from culture to culture and differently in the body. And he said, when you start, a lot of people think, oh, I experience it this way, so everyone must, which is nothing could be further from the truth. He said, it is wild. And he said, he's showing the mind blown thing where you go, and he said, it is mind blowing once you figure out how this all works, really from spirit's perspective. It's really quite cool. And he said, now when we talk about the shift, and everyone's wondering about what's the shift? And he goes, all right, I'll tell you. He said, it's really the shift in perspective from fear to love. It's a consciousness shift that goes, he said, you could say kind of up in dimensional reality, in which your five senses aren't all that you can experience anymore. And you start to have more telepathic ability, intuitive ability. He's showing able to have foresight and premonition or see all possible outcomes. He said, you start to expand out, but he said for humans, they tend to contract back in because we are in this perceived physical experience, and it's really difficult for us to walk, quote unquote, between worlds, to go back and forth between the world of spirit, where we're non-physical, and then to come back down. And he said, but really the larger part of you is non-physical. The larger part of you is actually spirit. It is the soul self. So you're not actually separate from any of us. That's why it's really easy for people who understand that and can step into that. He said it's sort of an out of body experience, but it's like not, because you're just using the body while you're here. So it's more like you become more identified or aware of the part of you that's outside the body, that you're bigger than the body and you're so much more vast than the body and so much more knowledgeable and intelligent and aware than the body. And so he said, when you come outside of the body, you start to feel more peaceful and more calm and at ease, because the body is what is always creating friction, because the body is kind of like the antenna. He said, you guys identify with the antenna. You think that's what you are, but you are actually all of the sound and all of the information coming into the antenna. You're just using the antenna to try to sift and sort through all of the sound coming from you and around you. And he said, but you're not limited to that. So he's going, so now as spirit, we're part of this, like he goes, it's kind of ethereal. And he's like putting his hand on his chin, like thinking, looking up and thinking. And he said, now I would call it like your essence. And he said, it's more of like an essence. And he said, because essence has a little bit less tangibility, right? He said it's less physical. And he said, that's where I want to get you to with language. He said, but in 3D human language, it's almost difficult, because a lot of your words, even really spiritual terminology and even certain terminology like scientific, like quantum physics, he was like, he goes photons and neutrons. And he's like, all of these things are actually quite limiting in terms of spiritual understanding. And he said, and so I'm trying to like funnel it down into 3D, and he shows himself like coming down in the funnel. He said, and so now you have to understand the larger part of you is non-physical. You are the soul. You truly are a spiritual being having a human experience. But he goes, I would go even a step further than that. And he's showing going up and out in that funnel, or up and out in that spiral. He said, actually, you are much more than a spiritual being having a human experience. You are actually part of the all. You're part of the source of all that is. You are part of the source itself. So you do not need to see that source essence or energy as apart from you. And so now when you realize that, it starts to kind of get a little trippy in the mind of humans. He said, now this is where spirit resides, because he said, we are aware of our singularity, but we also are hyper aware of our collectivity and the fact that we're not separate from anything or anyone. He goes, I can show up and look like myself in front of Allie or in front of a lot of people, because Eric, if you guys don't know this, Eric works with a lot of people. he helps people find each other all the time. And I've actually had people come, to contact me and be like, so this might sound super crazy, but like, I have Eric here and he's telling me to contact you, and I'm hoping you don't think I'm nuts. And I'm like, no, of course, I know exactly who Eric is. And they're like, oh, thank God. I thought I was going to sound a little Looney Tunes. And so Eric actually has that ability, and he said, I'm going to talk to you all about that later. But so with these types of beings like Eric, he's like, we can show ourselves in the physical, and Eric's really good at that. So if any of you decide to practice one day, I say this on my TikTok lives and in other videos and things like that, but Eric is really easy to practice with because he has like almost an extra developed ability to, he said, kind of like bring himself down, more physical looking, more physical in appearance. He said smell's a big one with him. I almost got a whiff of something and I was like, please don't. And I can feel him laughing. So like when he laughs, I don't just see him laughing, I can feel his laughter in my heart. And it's super funny. And he just showed ET phone home, like the finger beep, but like touching the tip of my finger. And he said, yeah, it's like that. It's like a little spiritual connection through your heart chakra. And he said, well, if you want to call it a chakra, he said, it's just really like the seat of the soul is in that area, if you want to say that. He said, but so basically Eric has more of an ability to show himself more physically, and people actually can hear him very clairaudiently. And I'm always interested when I channel him or other certain guides like Sam and other people, because people have said before with channelings of Eric, they're like, oh my God, I swear to God, if you turn this part up really loud, you can barely hear him talking in the background of the recording. So I'm always curious to see if anyone hears that. So if anyone does, please point it out to me and tell me where you hear it. But Eric is saying, now I can do that because I can work with technology and I can work with energy a little bit more. And he said, everything is energy. And he said, this is kind of like spirituality 101, but everything is energy. And he said, now I can make myself a little bit more denser. And he said, but people like Allie tend to be able to bring themselves also up and out in their vibration a little bit more. So they're not thinking that their physical experience is all there is. So like they're not, he said, it's kind of like you're not like totally just like stuck on, well, here's what I see, so that must be all there is. And he said, now imagine like there are people that are blind who don't have the ability to see with their physical eyes, but they see with their third eye all the time, and they sense and they feel and they smell and they can hear, and they have super hyper sensory abilities in other areas to compensate for the inability to see. But it doesn't mean that they can't see at all. It doesn't mean their third eye is not active, because your third eye is not contingent upon your eyeballs. He's like showing like someone looking through binoculars, and he said, you guys would think it is, because again, most humans assume that their experiences, like how they experience things, it's all there is. And he said, now with more and more of you guys being more open to the spiritual plane, it's going to be easier for you guys to identify with the non-physical part of yourselves. And he said, when you expand up and out, and you start to realize, wow, I'm so much more than just this human body, that's when it gets easier to see and perceive spiritual energy. And he said, we can look like orbs, we can look like angelic beings, we can come in and guide you as a form of like galactic council. And he said, we'll get into them in a little while. But he said, there's so many of us who are quote unquote on the other side. And he said, but really it's like this thin sheet between your world and ours. And he said, it's not even really there. It's just a difference in your perception. He said, it's that shift in perception from fear to love. And he said, it's really a dimensional shift. It has nothing to do with love as an emotion, like pouring love onto an object or a person, because you're not separate from anything or anyone. It's more of the state of being in which you originally reside, which is, he said, more of an eternal love. He started playing the song, an eternal flame. I cannot sing that, but that just popped in my head. And sometimes when they play certain songs, they make me laugh. So just if you guys hear me laughing out of nowhere, it's because I'm hearing songs or hearing movie lines in the background, almost as an extra way for them to work with me clairaudiently or convey what they mean. He said, yeah, we kind of have to work with the language or the vocab of the person. So he is showing me, he's like, but now you guys have this love within you at all times. You are made in love, with love, by love, for love, to love. You are not separate from that divine love, from that eternal being. You are the larger essence of yourself. And so in fact, you are spirit. He just keeps going, that's essentially what the higher self is. It's not just your higher self as in like, oh, the holier than thou, I knoweth all, and I am a divine being made of love. He's like, it's not about rigid morality. The higher self is actually all about being able to see things from a vaster, wider, and higher perspective. So the higher self almost has like the keys to the kingdom. He said He said it's more of that like divine essence that sees the bird's eye view when you're in your human experience and you kind of get that tunnel vision. He's showing fear, anxiety. And he said when you're over-identified with your body, it's really hard to shake that. And so you can always sit down, and he said, close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths into that belly. He goes, sometimes you might need to jump up and down, shake it out a little bit. He said, just to like loosen up. And he said, he's showing basketball players, they jump up and down before they go out on the court, just to loosen their muscles. And he said, yeah, because you don't want to be too rigid, and we'll teach you more of these energy practices in the upcoming course, which I'll mention at the end. But he's showing me it's really how easy it is to tune into your higher self. And he said, all you got to do is simply say, I'm willing to see another perspective other than this. And he said, now it's not just the higher self that you can contact. And a lot of mediums and psychics and channelers and people who work with spiritual perception and concepts, meditation, prayer, etc. He said, even like a good old savasana. I was like, that is so funny. Shavasana. He was like, you're just kind of, he said, children who are just love like laying on the grass outside, looking at clouds. He goes, they're very aware of spiritual beings and spiritual presence. They're very present and they're very in the moment. They're very in the body. And therefore, he said, the irony is that when you're really feeling in tune with your whole being in your physical form, that's when you become very in love with everything and everyone and everyone and everywhere. And you expand way out and become more aware of that lack of separation between you and everything and anyone. And so he said, so then you suddenly become aware that you are so much more because you're so present. He goes, that's when you can connect with your guides in a higher and fuller essence, a higher, fuller beingness. He goes, now some people can hear us all the time, but it's because they have a part of them that's always comfortable with being online, and they have a part of them that's cool with like kind of stepping in and out of that higher frequency. And he goes, these people are here to teach you. They're not just here to give you readings and tell you like, oh yeah, if you keep dating that, he used some language. He said, mother effer. If you keep dating that mother effer, you'll be pulled way off course, or that's going to really hurt. You're going to take some while, like with your soul getting back on track after that one. He goes, it's so funny. He goes, well, but really? And he said, we don't judge. We just kind of use certain terms to help lighten things up or help certain things joke around. And he's saying like, this is the way I talked when I was alive. So I'm going to come and bring it in now, even if it's with compassion and love. He goes, but the divine essence of you already knows this. So like, you don't need your guides always to tell you certain things, but they are an expanded consciousness because they're not identified with a body. So they can tell you things that allow you to, he's going like transcend limitations. He said, overcome fears. Remember that you are not confined to your human limitations. And he said, now people who can manifest things on the spot or can use telekinesis or telepathy, he said, or even like bigger intuitions and premonitions. He said people who can see auric fields and have more clairvoyance in terms of visions and things like that. He goes, they're more aware of this. It's just kind of trippy. It's almost like they think this is all I can do. And he goes, no, it goes way beyond that. But for the purpose of things today, we want to talk about your connection with your guides on the other side and how you work with spirit. And so he's showing me now the spiritual form of the human. He said, now you guys think you're just the body, but the reason people can see auric fields is because there's actually so much more to you than what most of you can physically see. And the more that you are allowing yourself to shift upward and outward in consciousness, the more of the light spectrum you can see. And he goes, if you've ever looked at this online, like try and look it up. There's an image that's like you can find anywhere, and it's like, here's the whole light spectrum, and it's like this huge thing, and then it's like, here's all humans can see, and it's like a sliver of it. And he said, so when you begin to expand your consciousness and you raise your frequency by doing energy work or channeling or whatever else, you can actually see more of the light spectrum. So you can see non-physical energy. And just because other humans can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. He's like, you can't see air, but you breathe it. Like, he's always like just because you can't always see the Milky Way because of light pollution or where you are in position, like of, you know, not being in the area to be able to see it. He's like, that doesn't mean it's not there. Like, you know, he goes, just because you can't see the bottom of the ocean doesn't mean it doesn't exist. He's like, just because you've never seen $1 million in human form doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. And so he just keeps saying there's all these examples of this. And so humans really need to wrap themselves around the fact that they don't know what they don't know, and they don't even know to ask questions about certain things because they're only looking at things through a limited perspective. And he's showing someone again with like horse blinders on or binoculars where they're in hyper focus all the time. And he said, this is what fear does. It puts you in fear focus, and it makes your brain narrow its focus, and it makes it so that you can only see what's in front of you, kind of like what you would need to do if you're in a really high paced, he's showing like driving on the highway and needing to be really focused because you're going at high speed, or he's saying like a fast paced game where you're like really running. He said at those times you need to be a little bit more narrowly focused, but you can expand outward and have more intuition in those moments. And he said, and often spirit can kind of find their way in, especially if there's a part of you that's more like offline or open to it. But he said, for the most part, you need to kind of come up and out, and then we can meet you in the middle. And he said, now people who are able to channel us all the time, they're kind of more at that meet in the middle point a little bit more often, and they've integrated that type of frequency into their body and into their field. So it's not going to feel so bad to them. Whereas like a lot of times when people are starting out, it feels like they stuck their finger in a light socket, or they get really spacey when they connect to the other side, or when they connect to certain specific spiritual beings. So he said, we want you to go slow with that process, because that's really important. But he is showing me how common it is to have what feels like more of, less so of a seeing someone who's in spirit, but more so being able to like sense them, or he's showing me like sensing people, or being able to he said like it's almost like you're looking at a part of the room, like you're like, I swear something was there, but you look at it and it's not there. And he said you have to look with your third eye because it's actually really there. He said, but sometimes people, it's easier for them to actually smell us, or for us to communicate with them telepathically where there's no sound, because it's not outside of your head. But for us to kind of like, he said, it's kind of like we find that little like, he's showing like, he goes, you know, you have all these cords, like the microphone Allie's using is connected to her laptop. It's got a cord connecting, but she could unplug the cord from either one at any time. He said, it's kind of like that. Like we plug in this little cord, he goes, and we're able to almost like boop, like right into your head. And he said, now we have that telepathic connection dialed in, but we can't reach you. We're sending you millions of messages all day, every day, but we can't reach you if you're not listening. He said, which brings me to my main topic for the day. And he's like, I know I'm getting here in a roundabout way, but he's like, I had to explain all this so we could get to this. He said, now, a lot of you are coming into a point in time where you need to allow for things that need to move out of your life to move out. And he said, for a lot of you, you're going to think, oh man, relationships or friendships or home shit, or, you know, he's like, or stuff with work, or like you're going to lose a job, or he's like, oh man, a lot of you are going to immediately freak. And he goes, that's because you're identified with the physical. So you're worried about what's tangibly there and what won't tangibly be there. And he goes, but I want to challenge you to think beyond this and start to say, are there any habits, any beliefs, or any patterns that I know it's time to let go of, but I have been struggling to let go of? And he's showing someone looking at food and going, you know what? I just don't, I don't know. I don't feel like this is serving me. I just feel like it's time to make a change in the way I'm eating. And he's showing someone who's getting out there and they're starting to go for a walk. So they're jogging. He said, or there's someone who is sitting down and they normally get into these like control dramas. He's showing the Celestine prophecy. If you've never read that, it's fantastic. It teaches about a lot of really cool stuff in a really cool way. But in the books, there are these things called control dramas. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of like a lower frequency way of engaging with life where you think your power is outside of you. So you have to go get it from other people or other events or other places. And he said, like, a lot of people, when they're engaged in those, they end up feeling very drained, and they're always trying to get their energy back from somewhere. But if you are the source of the energy, you don't have to ever worry about getting drained. So he's showing like kind of recognizing that. And he said, like, a lot of people are ready to make a shift in consciousness. And this time period, especially like starting now, is going to be really potent, and it's going to make it really easy for you guys to shift upward and outward and to not end up back where you're playing the game anymore. He said it's going to help, like, if you can let go of these certain beliefs and thought patterns, or he said, again, like gossip, control dramas. Let's say, like, he goes, let's say you get really happy and you have a really great day and everything's in sync and like you're experiencing all sorts of really cool synchronicities and you just ran into an old friend and everything's finally working out for you and you're feeling really like you're flying high, right? And you're just in the right place at the right time all day. And then you go home and you're like, you know what would be great if I go out and I celebrate with my friends and I have a bunch of beer. And he goes, people do this unconsciously all the time. They either binge eat or they flip into some sort of destructive pattern with a partner, like they pick fights, or they drink a lot, or they overeat, he's saying, or they do something like he's showing someone picking at their skin. And he said, like, they fat shame themselves. He's like, they just do something, or they scroll TikTok and suddenly they're in like that really great day is gone. Like, it's not even like it happened in the first place. He said, people are always trying to feel better, but then when they feel better, they find a way to unconsciously bring themselves back down. And this is because they struggle to maintain and hold a self-regulated, a nervous system regulation state when the world is in such chaos and they're used to letting chaos into their lives or creating it. So he said, you'll go back to what you're familiar to. And this is also about shifting between dimensional realities and dimensional states. And he said, but you can learn to hold this frequency higher and longer for longer and longer periods of time. And so it's going to be really important for you guys to remember that you're not only having to do this on earth, but you're part of this larger shift into higher consciousness. So it's okay to kind of have a little bit of that boomerang effect going on. But he said, but right now is a really good time to let go of anything that you know isn't supposed to stay in your life. And he goes, now you really could do this at any time. But he said, but when people are talking about it and they're like, oh, the astrology, he goes, why not use it? He goes, you don't have to believe that that's only time to do it. And in fact, that can tend to be pretty limiting for people, especially people who are already working in higher dimensional consciousness. They're not going to be as bound by time because they know that they aren't a victim of time, because space and time is 3D. So you actually, the larger part of you doesn't exist in any form of time. It's more in like eternal now. But he goes, we'll get into that another day, because that's really hard for humans to even conceptualize. And he goes, people get defensive a lot of times when we talk to them about it through other channelers. So he's like, he just goes, like, their brain is like, what? Nuh-uh. Like, I like my astrology. I like my stopwatches. I like blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and you know what? Good on you. Cool. Enjoy. That's where you're at. Use it. So he said, so now for a lot of you guys, it's going to be really important though to recognize that right now, it's not just because of astrology or the day or the portal or it's March 3rd or whatever. He said, it's really more so about the shift in consciousness that's happening in and out of time. He said, now it's more about that collective awakening. So use this time period to say, is there anything I have been perpetuating or continuing to do that doesn't serve me? And he's showing someone even who just got like a really great idea or just got a promotion at work, and they call that parent who just goes, oh, well, that's great, but I mean, are you making as much money? Or, oh, well, I bet you're not going to have enough time for your kids now, huh? Or like they just like poo-poo on it, and they, you know what I mean? They like either fearmonger or they trash mouth it. Like they kind of like take the rug out from under you. And he said, now y'all know better than to call them, right? You know they're not going to support you, but you do it anyways because there's a part of you that's like, I can't let myself have this higher energy or contain this higher frequency. And he said, I want you guys to practice this month when you're letting go of things. Breathe in, breathe out all the way through the body, ground through the earth, bring the earth back up to reground you. You want earthy energy coming up to you and around you. Breathe in. And he goes, now when you're starting to have things really good happen, because this month can be really sparkly and have a lot of really good things happen too. He said, you need to be breathing and holding those too. He said, it's okay to kind of bounce back and forth between different feelings and vibrations. He goes, but we don't want you to over-identify with them. Practice breathing and integrating them into the body. And he said, for those of you who want to have stronger intuition and stronger clairs, and you want to shift up in dimensional reality, and you want to be really cool co-creators, and you want to channel, and you want to talk to the other side, and use telekinesis, and have divine healing abilities, and yada, yada, yada. He said, you're going to be able to do that much more easily if you're able to do basic little everyday things like stop and take a breath. And he goes, that is going to make a massive difference. He goes, like little daily meditations, little daily tune-ins and check-ins with your body, little daily like, hey, I'm going to release this. It's time for this to go. He goes, talking to your body, releasing any old patterns, integrating new things is great. He goes, but at first you need to focus on the space that's being created this month. So if you have, for example, like an addiction to your phone and you're starting to put it down more, don't fill the space in your schedule where you would have been holding your phone and doom scrolling and whatever else with something else. Let yourself have the space. See what comes out of it. Are you more creative? Are you getting more ideas? You getting downloads or messages from the other side? Are you getting more inspiration and taking more inspired action? He goes, you need space if you want to begin to channel and if you want to begin to work with your intuition more and more. And he goes, that's why kids are such great intuitors, but they just have a lot of adults who come in, and he's showing like Pac-Man, like eating like stuff as it goes. And he said a lot of adults come over and go, oh, like they just, like here's the kid like bopping around, happy as a clam, following their intuition. And he said, and it's not to blame adults. Adults often have, they're in fear mode. They've lived more and they haven't learned how to acclimate higher energies and stay in flow and stay in more of that peace and love and harmony energy, because he said, like, you can do it despite the world around you. It's just, he said there's a lot of stuff there, but you can do it, and people have done it. And he's saying, but a lot of adults, they're more controlling. They have these routines, they have schedules, they got to do this. So they're often interrupting kids' flow. And that's where y'all learn how to turn off your intuition and turn off the higher frequencies, is when you're really young. He said, so we want you guys to start to reparent yourselves, teach your inner child. And he's pointing to his heart, like tapping on his chest. He said, teach your inner child that it's safe to hear yourself. It's safe to feel good. And it's safe to hold the energy and vibration of love, and love for life, love for space, love for creativity, love for self, love for just like, hey, I just feel good. I don't need to know why. I don't need to focus on it. I just love this good feeling inside of me. I don't need to think about it. It's just there. He said, just practice holding that a little bit more. That's a good way to reparent, is to teach yourself, it's safe for me to feel good. It's safe for me to feel safe. It's safe for me to feel sparkles and little spirit chills, and to get intuitions and to be inspired and to find my joy again. And he said, joy is neuroprotective. It protects your brain. There's tons of research and studies on this. I've read some of them too, and they're super fascinating. And he goes, now, we want you to continue, because there is such a spiritual renaissance happening right now, and it's going to continue for a long time. But spiritual renaissances, they come out of catalytic events, usually oppression, control, censorship, all sorts of things. And we also have this like spiritual and technological revolution and renaissance happening as well. And so it's going to be really important that we're able to allow ourselves to experience joy. And that is an act of revolution. That is an act of love, is like letting yourself have joy, letting yourself exist in more and more creativity, peace, harmony, and joy is the resistance. So it's going to be really important that we're doing that. And this is part of our consciousness shift and larger catalytic evolution. And he keeps showing it is not just worldwide, it's also beyond our dimension and our reality. And he said, no, I won't get into that today because it's pretty trippy. He's like, whoa, like it's almost like, yo, did. What? That's wild, man. And he said the people that will probably fully be able to grasp that in terms of feeling and sensory mode would have to be on some sort of psychedelic. He said there's like really deep transcendental meditators who might be able to do it. And he's like, he's saying, Allie's done stuff like that before where you can see it and sense it and feel it and you're in it. He goes, but it is really trippy. And I was like, it absolutely is. It's really bizarre. But he's like, so basically coming back down to earth, he's going like putting our feet back down the ground for a second. He said, it's very important that you are allowing yourselves to experience more and more joy and happiness, because people who are happy are difficult to control because they're not as afraid. They think clearly, their brains are working their brains are working better. They've got more of that natural dopamine and serotonin going on. Their brains have higher cognitive functioning rates, like they function better. They have higher memory recall, and they're thinking out ahead of things because they're in creative mode. But they're not reacting, they're just creating, right? He said they're just flowing with life. So they're less susceptible to cultural conditioning and to fear mongering. They're less likely to like play right into someone's hands or strategy, so they're much more, he keeps saying they also have this radiance about them. They have this kind of almost a feeling of safety that other people can feel around them. And he said, that's what we really want you guys to be cultivating, because you've already hit a mass tipping point of this, but you need to continue because you never know how many people you could impact. And he said, now with that, remember the larger part of you is non-physical. So when you're experiencing more and more of this peacefulness, this harmony, this bliss, you're going to be led and guided and inspired to go out and about and to be in more and more public places. And he goes, for those of you who are homebodies, get ready to get your walking shoes on. He goes, get your tennies on, and you're going to be out there bopping around, going and doing what you need to do. And he said, and probably to some really interesting new places and spaces too. And he said, sometimes there are people, or many people, who need to feel your energy in those spaces. So it's for you and it's for them. He said, many of you, when that larger part of you is emanating this amazing love, and he said, like your essence, right? Your joy, your creativity, your wonder, your curiosity, at the very least, other people can pick that up and they can bop into that frequency as well. He said, can you imagine how important that might be at a time like this? How easy it might be to help shift. And he goes, the best part about this is you don't even have to talk to anyone else about it. You don't have to convince them to see your side. You don't have to convince them to feel joy. You just go be it and let them come up there to meet you. You don't have to say a damn thing. And he's like, that's what I wanted to get out. And I'm like, well, that was that was a good roundabout way, but a lot of important stuff in there. He goes, what else you got, teacher? And he's kicking his legs up and crossing them over and putting his hands behind his head like he's leaning back and relaxing. And I said, all right. I'm like, okay, Eric, I love that. And he goes, thank you, ma'am. He goes, thanks for having me on. He's showing himself with his like podcasting headphones. And I was just kind of giggling over here. But it sounds like that's about it. And he goes, all fine and dandy. So if you guys have any questions about this, feel free to reach out in the link in the show notes. And it'll be a page. There's a page on my website where you can submit questions and stories and perspectives. You can reach out about being on the podcast, etc. So if you have any responses to this or any questions about it, you want Eric to come in again and talk about another topic or other guides to come in, please feel free to make those requests there. I would love, love, love to have you guys come and join us. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Just a reminder, I do have a masterclass coming up, and it'll help with channeling spiritual guides. It's for beginners and really any level. And then there will also be plenty of things going on in the Patreon group in March. So please come and hang out with us there. And we will have the Art of Channeling. The full live talk course will be starting in April. There are live classes that I will also do recordings of, so that if you have to miss one here or there, you can come back and watch the recording at an easier time for you. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to teach really how to do clear channeling. So if you're wanting to be a medium, if you're like, I really, really just want to be able to speak more fluidly, like I really struggle with articulation and getting my thoughts out, I feel like I have so much to say, I don't know how to get it out on paper, or I freeze up when I'm around people, this course will help you. If you're like, I feel like I have a calling and I want to come up with stronger ideas and I want to have the energy to move forward on them and take action on them. And I want to get into more flow and more ease and feel like I'm always in the right place at the right time. And like my body's not so resistant to what I need to do and my brain's not resisting so much. This course will help you. It's going to be really, really cool. We're going to integrate some really interesting energy code work. We're going to integrate some body and movement work to help you guys, breath work techniques that I have found incredibly useful. And we're going to also be doing some guided meditations and step-by-step lessons and processes, teaching all of the different forms of channeling so that you can really truly become a vessel for higher consciousness, for spiritual guidance, either to you and through you on earth. And whether you want to be a channeler like I am, where you're channeling the other side really obviously, or you're like, no, I just want to bring great ideas into my architecture firm. I want to have blueprints laying out in my mind. I want to have my next big crafting idea or thing for my Etsy shop ready. I really want to write a whole book and I want to sit down and feel like it's fluid and flowing and moving. I want to compose music. I want to just come up with things on the spot. I want to be a really great athlete in a certain way. Or if you're like, I'm just curious to see what happens, this is that course. Once you can channel an energy one way, you can apply it to anything else. So it is for people who do want to be mediums and psychics and energy workers and healers and all of that. But if you're like, well, I'm not really wanting to use my abilities that way, this will be beneficial for you as well. If you're like, I have more of an everyday type of use for this. All I would say is if you come and join us, just stay open because there will be a lot of possibility with it. All right, guys, all those things will be linked up in the show notes. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. And again, if you have any requests, feel free to submit them in the Patreon groups or submit them at the link in my bio or in the show notes. Thank y'all so much.